Good afternoon. We'll get started in about a minute. Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Gross, CEO of American Friends of Tel Aviv University. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, a conversation between Karen Avraham, Dean of the Faculty of Medicine and Tel Aviv University professor, and Mary Maydan, journalist and Tau alum. As March and Women's History Month come to a close, I would like to acknowledge the many women who have made and continue to make an impact at Tel Aviv University. While you may not know their names or even their specific contributions, there are countless women across campus who contribute to making Tel Aviv University the global leader it is today. I'm excited to introduce you to two women who are Tel Aviv University trailblazers. Both of our guests are accomplished women who are experts in their respective fields. They are leaders, inspiring, interesting, and bold. Today, you'll have an opportunity to meet Professor Karen Avraham, the first female dean of Tel Aviv University's Faculty of Medicine. She was recently named by the Globe's newspaper as one of the 50 most influential women in Israel. After today's webinar, I have no doubt that you will understand why she received this well-deserved recognition. Professor Avraham is a world-renowned geneticist whose research encompasses gene discovery and therapy aimed toward developing treatments and cures for inherited diseases, including deafness, epilepsy, developmental delay, and breathing disorders. Mary Sagi-Maydan is a journalist, architect, and Tel Aviv University alum. She is an accomplished journalist who was the former U.S. correspondent for the prestigious newspaper Globes and Haaretz in Israel. She has interviewed some of the most inspiring figures of our time, including Mikhail Gorbachev, Barbara Walters, Larry King, and Jerry Seinfeld, among others. A passion for design and a clear vision of what she wanted her home to look like led to her next career. Mary is the founder of Maydan Architects, a firm specializing in modern design. If you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A box and we will do our best to get to them. It is now my pleasure to turn the program over to Mary and Karen.
Hi, everyone. Karen, it is such a privilege to sit down for a conversation with you, and you're truly an inspiration. You're not only a brilliant scientist, you're also officially, as of Friday, one of the 50 most influential women in Israel. What does it mean to you to be on this list?
Well, first, let me say hi, Mary. It's so wonderful to spend some time with you again. I prefer it in person, I have to say, but this is a good alternative. Well, I have to say it's a bit overwhelming. We are so fortunate in Israel, and as Jennifer alluded, at Tel Aviv University and the Faculty of Medicine, to have so many outstanding women, whether they're scientists, researchers, scholars in many different areas. I think there's a lot of reasons we could dissect why women have become so prominent in Israel. And to be on that list is, wow, I mean, it's humbling. It's a tremendous honor. Yeah, I don't know if I've absorbed it completely because it really is quite overwhelming.
Did it come as a surprise or you knew it was coming?
No, it was a total surprise. I didn't know about it. Yeah, no.
Who was the first person you called to tell them about it?
My husband, Mati. And then my mother, and then a close third was my son. And it might have been messages all simultaneously, actually.
I wanted to ask you about your mom because you have told me before that your mom is your role model. Can you share a little bit about her and how has she influenced who you are today?
Sure. So I think that every woman that you talk to, and men as well, have a mentor, an advisor, someone pivotal. Sometimes it's a few people, because I could name a few people that really, in certain periods of your life, help determine which direction you're going into. And with my mother, I think it's because I watched her. She was self-made as a businesswoman in New Jersey and went from having a very, very small business in the top floor of our home in New Jersey when I was growing up to having a building, several stories and tens of workers, and a very, very successful business over a period of about 35 years. So watching that growth, that determination, that ambition, not willing to accept no for an answer and just being a trailblazer, it was what I grew up with. So it was almost normal for me. I remember when my son was 16 and there was a woman, you may all remember, running for president, and he said, why can't a woman be a president? So I grew up, I was raised in that type of environment that a woman can do whatever she wants.
So I have a question about it, because if we're talking about the notion that everything is possible, I wanted to ask you about something that is becoming almost impossible, and that's getting into med school. Does it make sense that students have to improve their final exams, their bagruyot, in Bible studies and in history? And sometimes it takes years to get into school where there's such a shortage of doctors.
Well, I should start by saying that we are so lucky that there are so many brilliant young people who want to become physicians, because finally, these are the ones who are going to be taking care of us in our future. And we're certainly seeing, as the population is aging even more, the number of physicians that we need, both generally and to specialize, is really getting larger. And in fact, I think you're alluding to the fact that there's a lot of news now that we have a severe shortage of doctors in Israel. So we're really very lucky. It's tough, and it's tough to get in because it's tough to go through the studies. There's a lot you need to know. You have to be very focused. You have to be ambitious. You have to be dedicated. You have to be willing to work 24/7. You have to have enormous compassion and care for other people. And you can have gone 3 days without sleep, but you still have to treat that patient like they are absolutely number one, and you'll do anything in the world for them. So you really have to be a person that has everything to be a physician. I think it takes so much. So the fact that it's hard to get in, I think it's because of the criteria that are needed to really be an outstanding physician. And I mean, it does go with the complexity of the healthcare system. You need to have enough classrooms, enough teachers, enough beds in the hospitals where the students can train. You have to have enough spots for residency. So there's only so much capacity any system can have in terms of how many trainees they can have going through the system. And so that combination is what makes it hard. So we are increasing the number of students. We increased at Tel Aviv University by 30 students last year. We're growing by 60 next year. And the whole country is making an effort increasing students. So it'll help a lot, but it won't completely take care of all the shortages that we have, unfortunately.
I was talking a few weeks ago with a friend of mine who comes from a long line of doctors. So mom is a doctor, dad is a doctor, babushka is a doctor. And she told me when I was applying for grad school, my mom told me, you can do whatever you want in your life after you graduate from med school. So she's a Stanford doctor, but she also did an MBA. And I told her, today you wouldn't have had to negotiate with your mom because the chances of making it are so small anyway. Do you understand the allure, the appeal that all these students feel? Why are they so eager to be doctors?
Well, I would argue that a lot of young people don't quite know what they're getting themselves into. I think we certainly see a difference in the different programs depending on the age of the students in terms of their maturity. So, and I think it's still very prestigious to be a physician. I think the idea of taking care of humanity is something that is ingrained in many of us. And I think what we're very lucky at the Faculty of Medicine is that not only do we have a medical school or a school of medicine that trains physicians, but we also have a school of dental medicine that trains doctors, a school of health professions that trains physiotherapists, occupational therapists, communication disorder specialists, and nurses, of course. So there's tremendous opportunity, actually, at the Faculty of Medicine to be able to train for any type of health professional, depending on your personality, on what it is that you like to specialize or work in. So we're very lucky that way.
I wanted to ask you about your expertise. So you are a PhD, not a medical doctor, and I hear from everyone that the lab is your happy place. Can you tell us a little bit about your research? How did you become interested in deafness?
Yeah,
What-
actually, I started out being pre-med. Like many in my early 20s, I wanted to be a physician. I was at Washington University in St. Louis, and I started washing glassware in a lab to make a little extra money, and started working each semester. I washed less glassware and did more research. I worked with an outstanding graduate student who taught me a lot about molecular biology, and I just simply fell in love with it, with asking a question and then being able to spend time in the lab and reading about it and trying to solve a problem. And I've never lost the ability to just love that. Now, one of the advantages of having your own lab is then you have a whole team of people who are working together to ask those questions. And being in a lab it's a lot of highs, because you're constantly doing experiments and the experiment works and then you get results. And sometimes it's answering a small question, sometimes it's answering a large question, but it's also lows. So you have to learn to deal with rejection. Your paper didn't accepted, your grant didn't get in, the experiment didn't work. But when things work, there's really nothing like it. So it's a happy place, because also it's very much, I know that sometimes people have this image of you're in the lab, you're kind of alone with petri dishes. It's so, being in a lab, especially in genetics and genomics, is so different, because we're a team that's all working towards trying to understand and find cures in the future for genetic diseases. And it's such an integral teamwork. Lots of young students, so things stay moving all the time, and it's a happy place. It's a very exciting place to be.
I always think that for research you need patience. Are you a patient person?
Wow, that's interesting, because I love to do things really quickly. If I guess I must be, because I also can work on experiments, that take months. But I think that the way I would translate it, I think it depends on whether what you get satisfaction out of are also the everyday small things, or it's only the big things. And I think that I really enjoy the day-to-day so much. And I never really thought about it that way, whether I have the patience for the results. I must, because I've been doing this for about 35 years now.
So tell us a little bit more about your research.
So what we've been doing for many years now is to try to understand the genetic basis of disease. Now, we started out, and this has been the bulk of our work, is to look at hearing loss or deafness. And this is an area that I got into during my postdoctoral fellowship. There were some models that I was able to choose which project I wanted. It was very, very early days in terms of genetics and genomics. None of the genes had been identified that lead to deafness in humans and in mice, which is the model of choice that we use. And so I knew that I wanted to come back to Israel. I knew that I would have the potential to be able to work with families, with relatively large families with inherited deafness. And so I thought this would be a really good transition. Now, it was ambitious, because now it's funny, because probably it would take a good student in my lab 2 months to identify the gene that took me about 4.5 years. And it was really an all or nothing. I mean, if I had not found that gene during my postdoc, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today. I'd be somewhere else doing something else. So I got, lucky, a lot of hard work. And then when I moved to Israel and I accepted the position at Tel Aviv University, then I transitioned also into human genetics. And I've been able to really have the balance of working with the population, identifying genes in both the Israeli, Jewish, and Palestinian Arab population. Amazing collaborations I've had with scientists all over the world, learning the latest techniques, having the students trained in the most advanced technologies. So it's been just absolutely wonderful. And if I put in perspective what we knew 30 years ago, or I started actually in my new lab 27.5 years ago, to what we know today. It's really extraordinary, the progress that's been made.
What are the biggest challenges in the field?
Wow. There are a few, right? I've been very fortunate because, I mean, there are challenges like really recruiting the best people to do the work, people who are not only ambitious to find the answers, but are passionate about science, because things can take a long time, because there are the failures, and there's a lot of times, you work so hard and you're sure that you're going to succeed, and then you get a rejection. And so you have to be able to deal with the rejection relatively quickly, get over it, and move on. Because if you let it carry you down, then you just can't move to the next step. So I think that that's one of the challenges, is just always having that part of you that's so driven that you just keep getting back up no matter what. And then, so it's finding the people who are really passionate, who want to work with you as a team. It's getting enough of the latest equipment that you need, having enough funding so that you have the supplies that you need. As salaries goes up, making sure that you can be competitive relative to other places. We're constantly in academia dealing with the competition with high tech, with companies that are biotech and pharma. But I think we're very lucky, because academia still has not only a charm, but a very, very important place in the world. It is a place that you can be wilder with your ideas. You can do things like, recently I received a prize from a grant, a very nice grant from the Israel Science Foundation, that's called a breakthrough grant. And it's called what they call high risk, high gain. And so I have, a wild idea, and if it works, it'll be tremendous. And so they're willing to take a chance on us based on the success that we've had over the years. Companies can't always allow themselves to do things like that. And being able to do basic research that's going to be translated in the hospitals, in the clinics, by the companies, is so important. You can't just start in the clinic. You can't start in the companies. So academia and basic research has a very important role to play here.
So you talked about the breakthrough grant. Where do you see the next breakthroughs in medicine?
Oh, well, we always have the debate on, everyone, probably many in the audience, are familiar with CRISPR, which allows gene editing. You can actually change base pairs in the DNA, in the ACTG of the DNA. So I think that mostly where we're going is to be able to offer gene therapy that will change the way a child develops, and either prevent genetic diseases or delay them. When they're going to be able to be prime time, it's still an open question, but there's so many advances being made in genetics and genomics and advanced tools that I think we're moving in that direction. We always have to take everything that we're doing, all the advances, with a caution. We have to look at the ethical aspects. Discussions have to be made among the public. We have to make sure that everything that we're doing is as safe as it can possibly be. But if we look at things, at different technologies that have been part of the medical arena in the last couple of years, immunotherapy is one example. There's some AV treatments that are being done for a few genetic diseases. We can see that there have been tremendous improvements in the last couple of years. And I think we're just at the beginning of a lot of them.
When do you think we'll have answers to deafness, to blindness, to cancer? If you had to guess.
Well, one thing I think it's really important to qualify, that none of these are one disease or one disorder. And I think what all three that you mentioned, what really characterizes them is that each one you may consider cancer one entity or deafness one entity, is caused by many different genes. Now, it depends on the complexity of what's happening in one person. Sometimes it's just a change in one base pair of the DNA, and this is what causes the entire cascade of hearing to fail. And other times it's actually multiple genes that have changes in the DNA that could be leading to a hearing loss that occurs very late in life. At the same time, we know that there are environmental causes to making diseases more severe. We know that there's regions of the genome in between the genes, and this is called epigenomics. And those regions are actually controlling genes. I think that's where the next breakthrough is going to be, understanding how that regulation happens. And so while we used to think that things were much simpler, it's turned out to be a lot more complex. And even when you're looking at one disease and you think you have one type of change, actually there's a lot going on in our genetic background that can make all kinds of variables. When you get the disease, how severe it's going to be. You could look at a family that apparently has the same genetic change, and yet you'll see quite a variability even between siblings. So on one hand, that adds to the complexity. On the other hand, it's what makes our work so fascinating.
So one last question about the future of medicine. I love the theory that the lifespan is going to really extend. Do you believe that lifespan will extend to 150, 200 years?
So when we talk about extension, we actually, it's really important to talk about improving the quality of life in later years. And so if you're going to increase the lifespan by X number of years, but the quality of that person's life isn't going to improve, then you're really not getting what we should be trying to accomplish. So the goal really needs to be, as we extend life, and life is being extended because of our diets are better, medical treatments are better. And if you compare the last 40 years to now, it's dramatic difference. But what we really have to keep in mind is as we increase life, that the quality improves. And so I know that there's a lot of effort to try to do that, especially because some of my closest colleagues who are geriatricians have said that we're actually in a tsunami now, because the number of people who are aging and staying alive longer is getting bigger and bigger because of healthcare, because improvements all across the board. But we don't necessarily see as much of an advance in the quality of life. So we have to really try to bring those two together. As for number of years, yeah, eventually it'll probably be 150, but I don't think I'll be alive at that time. Who knows? Those are really impossible predictions to make.
Well, 150 years will be wonderful. If that's the case, you're just in your first third and you've done so much. So you are the first female dean of the med school. You're the second PhD, not MD. What made you interested in being the dean? Was this a natural next step for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure, looking back, if this is where I tend to have a 5-year plan. I don't think that I thought that far ahead many years ago, even though I met somebody who was a student just as I was starting my new lab, and he said, I knew you were going to be dean. So I don't know if that was the case, but I think really it was a natural progression, because I've been vice dean before that for 12 years. And before that, I was chair of the department I'm in, human molecular genetics and biochemistry. I've always led things. I was in high school, I was vice president of GIFTI. And then, in college, it was even more fun, because I was in Team 31. I organized concerts. I brought the Pretenders and Spyro Gyro to Washington University in St. Louis. That was a lot of fun. But I was always on the student committees, and then I became president of the student committees. And I think really what drives me is that I want to make things better for other people. I want to try to enact change. And I don't think I'm revolutionary. I accept things in a system quite well. So if, it's absolutely can't be done, I think I know what battles I should fight and which I shouldn't. But if I think that things can be improved, I work very hard to make that happen. And so that's always driven me. I'm not sure where that came from, but I know that it's something that has driven me. So for 12 years, I was vice dean. And as I became more and more involved in the decisions that were being made at the level of the faculty, it was really, it did become the next step for me, because my vision for the Faculty of Medicine is to really bring the basic researchers, what we call the preclinical faculty members like myself, and connect us really strongly with the clinicians. So our Faculty of Medicine, we're about 110 PhDs and about 1,200 MDs. And many of us are on campus, and then the majority are at the hospitals. That ability to bridge basic research to translational to clinical research is really the absolute key to treating and to curing diseases, which as a geneticist, that's my goal. And so being able to be part of a system that can transition from the basic to the clinical research, to bring the scientists and the clinicians together to do really remarkable work, it's an enormous, first of all, enormous sense of pride. And with that goal in mind, it was the natural place for me to be. Being able to combine training, education for medical students, for graduate students doing research, for health professionals, students in public health, and being able to bridge that with really state-of-the-art research that is going to help cure and treat diseases. I think that combination is, I can't imagine doing anything better. The other thing that I think we're really very lucky at Tel Aviv University, because we're very multidisciplinary. So many of the questions that we ask, we don't do it just at the level of biology, or we work with physicists, with mathematicians, neuroscientists, computational scientists. And in fact, a couple of months ago, our medical students initiated a medtech hackathon. And so they collaborated with hospitals and HMOs who came up with medical questions. And then there were hundreds of students who competed to actually be the groups that came up with these answers, 40 hours straight, hardly any sleep. And what was really remarkable to see is that each group was made up of medical students. There were kids from administration, from business administration. There were physicists, chemists, computer scientists. And I think that is really points to the fact that today, in order to understand almost any question in science, you really need to attack it from many different areas. And I think we are very lucky to be able to have that strength at Tel Aviv University.
So you said what drives you. I am very curious about your secret. So I hear that you, and I've also experienced it, you always answer promptly. You know, the story about you is that you never sleep. If someone sends you an email at 4 a.m., they get an answer at 4:15. You always try to help people. And I have heard, just by asking you a little bit around, people ask you about a clinical trial for a friend. You always try to help. How do you do it all? What's your secret?
Well, probably one of them is that I do sleep, actually. I love to sleep at least 7 hours a night. I envy people who can do really well in 3 to 4 hours, like my husband, for example, Mati. I can't. I'm not functional if I don't get at least 7 hours. And 8, I'm really, really happy. I love to do a lot of things at one time. I think that is something that drives me. And so I just answer quickly, but I do sleep. I really do.
So it's Women's Month, so I'm going to ask you a question that you probably get asked a lot. Do you think that you can really have it all? Be a brilliant scientist, save lives, be a wonderful mom?
I think, yeah, first of all, of course, I think you can, right? I mean, I know so many remarkable women at all different ages who have done it. I think it's important to define for yourself as a woman what it is that you want to do and what it is that you want to achieve. and that vision for yourself shouldn't be something that other people impose on you. And so every woman should find the balance for themselves of what's important. You know, is exercising important? Is spending a lot of time with your kids important? Is being in the lab? Is being in the hospital if you're a clinician? You know, everyone has to choose what makes them happiest, and also where the bar is. You know, how far are you willing to go? And I mean, I think for myself, going back to sleep, when I was younger, I mean, I could stay up till 4 a.m. It didn't matter what fatigue wasn't even an issue. And now midnight, 1 a.m, I hit a wall. That's it. I don't care what has to be done, and I go to sleep. So everybody has to find that limit for themselves. And I think that the more you accept how far you want to go for yourself and feel comfortable with it, then I think that then it's limitless, because the limits that you impose are on yourself so that you'll be happy. And so other people may see them as limits. I don't see them as limits, because you've decided for yourself what you want to do and what you don't want to do. So I think that being comfortable with yourself, it's not always easy because there is pressure on us, but I think it's really important to look inside yourself and really evaluate what it is, what you want to do, and feel strong and comfortable with that.
As the first female dean, do you think that your leadership style is different?
Oh, well, you know, it's a tough one. I think leadership style is a lot about the type of person that you are. You know, I tend to not put myself in a niche that I do things just because I'm a woman, or if man does because they're a man. There's so many gray zones, or it's so blurry at the junction. So I think it's much more of a personality than more of a gender-driven kind of leadership. So no, I don't think so.
You sit with a lot of egos at every meeting. Do you have a strategy to handle it?
Yeah, well, you know, one thing I do have to say, that a lot of times at a meeting, I will ask people if we can just speak one at a time. You're from Israel, you know that sometimes there's a tendency, we all like to speak at the same time. We all have so much to say. And so that's something that I have to do. I think that listening to people, giving people a chance to express themselves. I've learned, one thing that I've learned in the past, since September 1st, more than I think I used to do, is to delegate, to trust the people that you delegate. It's really important. I've been so fortunate. We have an amazing team, both in an academic and administrative point of view, because everything that we do requires a lot of people to do the work. And I think that, again, going back to how I view science and academics, it really is about many people working together. And the more you can get people to work well together and interact, then the better and stronger your projects are going to be.
So, you know, when reading your biography, it looks like you went from success to success to success. Is there anything in your path that you consider a failure?
You know, I think I come from a generation that, first of all, we didn't talk a lot about our failures. It was more, I mean, I could show you a huge folder I have of grant rejections, right? So now I guess it's about, how do you define failure? So one person can look and say, okay, she applied for 150 grants and she got 100 of them. So it means that, you know, I failed 50 times. But I don't look at it that way. I don't think I failed 50 times. I'm in a very competitive field. Usually there are objective measures why you don't get a grant. You didn't write it well enough. Your budget wasn't cohesive enough. There's a lot of other competition. There are projects that reviewers thought were stronger. Sometimes even if 20 or 30% of the grants will get a top score, they can only fund 10% of them. So I guess it's how you decide if you define failures. I certainly know when I was a postdoc and I wasn't sure if I was going to clone the gene and then be able to apply for a faculty position, which is what I really wanted, and get a job, I thought of alternatives. I thought of being a lobbyist on Capitol Hill. At one point, because I loved physics, I even thought of engineering. I mean, I did think of alternative careers. And if it would have gone in that direction, I don't think that I would have looked at myself and said, oh, I failed because I didn't clone my gene. I just would have moved in that direction. I think that throughout my life, when things didn't work out perhaps exactly like I wanted, I didn't get the particular grant, or I ran for something that I didn't get it. I can't say that I'm not disappointed. Sometimes it's a few minutes, sometimes it's an hour, sometimes a day, but I bounce back very quickly. I move forward very quickly. I just keep moving forward. And I think, to me, that is something you certainly learn over time, but I think has helped me a lot, is that I think also when you make decisions in your life, or when things happen in your life, that it happened for a reason at that time. And if I look at myself now, and I think of who I'm married to and where I live and the type of science that I do, sometimes it was just because of one decision, deciding to go to Tel Aviv University or deciding to go someplace else, deciding to move to Israel, deciding to stay in the United States. So much of what my life is like today, because of that one decision, it completely changed the course of what I'm doing today. And I think that that's one of the most exciting parts of life, that you just keep yourself open, that even if you fail, and again, it depends on how you define fail, that usually opens doors for something else. Now, I'm not talking about tragedies. I'm not talking about illnesses, God forbid, and things like that, which I'm, of course, very fortunate that I've been unscathed mostly in my life. But I'm talking about things that, the type of things that we have control over that don't work out. You want a promotion, or you want the kind of job, or you run for an office that you don't get. I think how you deal with those rejections, I think has a lot to do with how you deal with everything in general in life.
You mentioned your decision about coming to Israel. What made you come to Israel?
So my third year at Washington University, I was done with my requirements for my major. It was getting a little boring in St. Louis. No offense to St. Louis. It was going back, in the 80s.
Not boring in Israel, that's for sure.
It was not built up then. Yeah. And I decided to spend a semester in Israel. It was actually 8 months. And I fell in love with the country. Now, I had grown up coming to Israel in the summers to visit my grandparents, while my friends went to very regimented day camps or sleepaway camps in the United States. I came to my grandparents. This is before the days of cell phones, and basically my grandparents would give me breakfast. We would say goodbye, spend the whole day outdoors playing, and come back in the evening for dinner. I had so much freedom, and when I came here at the age of 21, I felt very safe in Israel, which I think to some people might feel kind of ironic. But I couldn't walk alone in New Jersey and in New York and places, and I could at that time everywhere in Israel. So I felt much more personal safety, and I felt that life in Israel had more of a sense of purpose, and I just loved it. I mean, it was a lot of fun. Again, part of it was the wonderful times growing up in Haifa, and the experiences that I had. We tend to carry them into our adult life. So those decisions, and then I decided to apply to the Weizmann Institute. I got in, and the rest is history, and I've never looked back. I will say that the first years, it was challenging, and even though I had family in Israel, and I was married, and then I had a kid, you still always wonder. I think everyone moving to another country wonders, did they make, because it really is such a change. And so I had the Robert Frost poem on my board, The Path Less Chosen. And I think was very proud of myself that I took the different path. I didn't stay in New Jersey and do kind of the typical things that maybe what was expected of me. I did something different. And so I reveled in that.
I've been watching with my daughters Grey's Anatomy forever. And my youngest, actually, I think she knew how to say push one of Epi before she knew to tie her shoelace. And then I started watching Amit Machim in the Israeli equivalent. And the interaction between patients and doctors is so different in Israel. So in Israel, the patient will say, Neshama, Tahamud, it's very different. Where, being an American and an Israeli, what do you relate to more? Are you adjusted to this culture?
Very much. I think I'd like to think that I've kind of kept some of the good American traits. But I think I've adjusted quite well to Israel. First, my Hebrew has really improved in the past couple of years.
Oh, it's wonderful. I can
Yeah,
talk.
my writing is still, a little not so great, but I've been lucky because all the years in Israel, science is really, English is the language. And so almost everything we do is in English. And so now as I've done more administrative work, of course, my Hebrew has had to improve, and I really have been working on it. I think I thrive on the energy of Israel, the dynamics of Israel. I mean, it's no accident that we're called the startup nation and that we create things out of nothing. Maybe looking back at my mother, who was born in Israel, right? She did the same. There's just a drive here to excel, to succeed, to, no matter how many, I watch what we're doing since I became dean at the Faculty of Medicine on September 1st. And we already have so many good things, but every day we come up with another idea for another program, and there's just something that drives us. And I can't really explain it, but I know that it's something very much part of our environment in Israel, and it's part of what I really love. And one of the reasons I came to Tel Aviv is I felt then, and I still believe, that there's so much that you can do. There's so much that you could change. And on one hand, we have strict rules, but people are also very malleable. If you can convince somebody of something, and it makes a lot of sense, then people will move in that direction. And that ability to be flexible within the context of rules is really, I think, what's brilliant about both Israel and I think Tel Aviv.
But going back to the med school, how can Tel Aviv University med school compete with the schools of Harvard or universities that get such huge endowments?
Yeah, we would like one of those endowments. Well, I think, we can compete. We can't compete, obviously, from a financial point of view. We don't have those resources. That's kind of black and white, though we aspire to. But we're very ambitious to excel at the same level. There's no question that we all feel that we're competing, in a good way, because science is very competitive, against our colleagues at the finest universities worldwide, both within Israel and outside of Israel. And we're very much driven to do so. We have a hard time accepting no as an answer. And we compete, for example, ERC, European Research Council grants, which are the most competitive and most lucrative grants worldwide. We have, Tel Aviv University has the highest number. The only other places in the world that have a higher number, they're actually institutions that have multiple locations. Tel Aviv University is one campus. So I think it's because we're just so driven to excel and to do well. We have NIH grants, which are highly competitive in the United States. So I think it's part of what drives us to excel. So even though we don't have the same resources, we're trying to get the same resources, but I think we're also a lot more efficient with less money, partly because we have to be. So, it works, because I think if you look at the publications, at the press releases, at the news that comes out of Tel Aviv University, we're leading the way in so many different areas. And, there might be other places with the same amount of resources that don't even come close to us. So there's something about that drive. Maybe it's the water, I don't know.
So you travel a lot in the world and you meet a lot of other deans. How difficult is it right now to come from an Israeli institution with the political chaos in Israel?
Yeah, it's really difficult because we pride ourselves on being apolitical, and we're very focused on science and our research, and this is what we do. And now many of us have been kind of thrown out of our comfort zone to, I mean, I wish I had a picture to show you here of me in a demonstration last week with all of the deans at Tel Aviv University. And I have to say, you know, I'm not a political activist. I would not have imagined that I would be out on the streets demonstrating. It's just not, you know, there's some people who maybe that's the first thing they think that they would do. I can't say it was, but there was no question that as soon as it came down to an issue with basic human rights and equality for all, that I was out there with everyone else. It's difficult, I think, because we have so much to offer scientifically. And, you know, as a startup nation and all of the really the tremendous medical and other breakthroughs that we do in Israel. And my fear is that it's, you know, people are just going to lose sight of that, and they're going to be focusing on the difficulties that we're having politically, human rights wise. So it is difficult, because I would like to think that I should be treated like a scientist from any institution in the world. And I know that there are places that I will go that I won't be because of what's going on now. So I can only hope that there'll be resolution at some level. Change always occurs, both good and bad. And I think we have to just wait and see how things go.
But Tel Aviv University, maybe more even than the other universities, has been vocal about what's going on, and we've talked about it. You actually did think that it's the right thing to do. And can you elaborate a little bit more about the role of academia in this case? And the president has been very involved in a very good way.
Yes, well, I think we're very lucky to have President Ariel Porat now. He is a law professor, so that helps because he can understand it at a level that, I mean, I have to say that I can certainly speak for myself that we understand it much less. But he also has a very clear vision of how we should be outspoken to defend the democracy and to take care of the basic human rights that are so essential. And he's encouraged us also to do so. And it wouldn't be enough that just the president would do so. It has to come from as many of us as possible. So again, everybody has to do it at the level that they feel comfortable doing so. We've had really remarkable weeks at the university. We've had what we call Democracy Week. We've had Hyde Park and demonstrations. Well, the demonstrations have been more off campus, but a lot of classes and symposiums for us to learn and understand what's happening in the country. I've heard more talks about law and social studies and politics than I've heard in a long time, because normally we just really focus on biology and medicine. So it's been a real eye-opener for all of us. But on the other hand, I think it's a lot like, you know, obviously the situations are so dramatically different, but a lot like COVID, that you just have to go out there and do what you have to do. I mean, one of the things I really had so much faith in humanity during the COVID period, when I watched people who had a career in X and all of a sudden completely changed to COVID within a couple of days, because they realized that this could be the matter of life and death for people in the world. And even a relatively small, well, with the largest university in Israel, but relative to the world, we're a relatively small university. And there so many scientists decided and clinicians that they were going to invest everything, and maybe they could make their mark and make a difference. And this was not about their own ego or succeeding for their career. This is truly about making a change to affect what was happening with the pandemic. I feel the same way now. I feel that a lot of people are really out there taking responsibility, because we very much, what each of us do, I think very much determines what our future is going to be. And we all have a part to play in that. And it's actually been very heartwarming to see how involved everyone has been around me.
Absolutely. It's amazing that in 3 or 4 years, we've had 2 such historical events that really changes who we are, right? I know that we're almost running out of time. I could talk to you forever, but there are a few questions that I really wanted to ask you personally. So I'll do a little bit of a switch here. What do you think is a misconception about you?
About me. Oh, that I don't sleep, but I do. I don't know. It's really hard to think, what do people, I think when I was younger, I cared a lot what people thought. Today, I don't think that you can be a leader or a public figure and focus too much on what people think about you. I think it's much more about the type of job that I'm doing, and am I helping? Am I making the right decisions? I think it's more about that. So I think it's less about me and more about the type of job that I'm doing. Obviously, it's me doing the job, but I think that that's how I've evolved. I mean, I will confess I don't have hobbies. So if people think that I do, I don't. And I think it's partly because I am very focused on my work. It does take a lot of time. But in my defense, I love it. It's often what I choose to do. And this goes back to what we discussed earlier about everybody has to set the limits about what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And I know what it is that I like to do, and that's how I run my hours. But I know how to take the breaks. I know how to take time off. I know how to treat myself really well, so that I'll have the strength to be able to do what it is that I do the rest of the time. I think everybody has to know where their limits are and just how far they can go. Because I think one of the things that I also said to myself when I took this job, and I as it's evolved and I've seen really the tremendous amount that it takes from you, and it can on a personal level, is really to take care of myself. Because if I don't, at the end, those closest to me are the ones who are going to suffer, not to mention me. And so I make sure that I'm eating well and I'm sleeping well. I'm not exercising as much as I'd like to, I have to admit, but I'm working on changing that maybe when the weather gets a little warm. But so I think that everybody has to really, you really need to take care of yourself. I think that's a really important message that I could give to anyone, no matter how hard you work.
What do you dream about? What would you like your impact to be, your legacy to be?
I dream about peace. I mean, I have to say that one of the reasons, going back to when I moved to Israel, I did feel that there was more of a sense of purpose to life in Israel. And very soon after I came here, I started working with Palestinian scientists. I have an NIH grant with Palestinian scientists. I've had students in my lab. I've run training programs. And I really had hoped for many years that the work that we did scientifically, where there are no borders, would make an impact and bring peace. We're in worse shape now than we ever were, unfortunately. So the impact that we've been able to have has been much more on a personal level between people, and it didn't have as broad as impact as I would have liked. So I think my legacy I would kind of the really big picture is, I wish that there was peace. I wish that we understood that we have, we're on this earth for such a limited amount of time. Really, it's, even if you're talking about 150 years, even 150 years, it's a small amount of time in the overall context of history. And why not make the most of it in the best possible way? We have limited resources in terms of the world. We have climate change that's impacting on us. Why not be in a place where we're compromising and we're understanding that really what's important is our health? Instead, we're focusing, people are focusing on things that, we could talk for another hour, so I won't elaborate, but just, there's a lot of tragedy in the world. And then in a smaller picture,
Legacy in the med school, for example.
The med school. Well, that really is what I talked about earlier, is to really bridge basic research to clinical research, that we really can take the strength that we have of our researchers, of our clinicians, of the next generation that is just ambitious and bright and so eager to do well, and to create a platform. We're creating what we call a synergy platform, or clusters, where we're pairing up PhDs and MDs together to tackle really important medical problems. And I think that those kinds of bridges, that's what I'd be happy to be able to leave our med school with, faculty of medicine with. But having said that, I still have 7.5 more years or 5.5, you know, I have a number of years coming up. So there's still a lot to do. We still have a lot of plans, a lot of teamwork. And so I hope the future is going to be bright for us.
And I want to end with the ending question that Baba Walters always asks, and I really like it. Complete the sentence for me. Karen Avraham is.
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to have to watch some of your the tapes that the interviews that you've done. I think someone with energy, someone who wants to make change. I really want to help people. I think I have a capacity for love. Wonderful family that I'm close with, husband, son, mother, friend. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a it's a challenging question. So I'll think about it even beyond this webinar.
Your energy is contagious and you're inspiring. And I see that Jennifer is already here, so we are over. Thank you so much for the interview. And Jennifer, back to you.
Thanks to both of you, Mary. You are masterful in your interview skills. We appreciate you sharing them with us. And Karen, you, I think your accomplishments and achievements speak for yourself. It'd be hard to think of a more dedicated, caring, giving person than you are. And we're so fortunate to have you on Team Tel Aviv University, and certainly a superstar for Team AFTAU. So we thank you for always being such a great partner. It was great. Thanks to both of you for sharing your time with us today. We'd also like to thank our friends from around the world for joining us. If you would like to learn more about the work that's happening in the Faculty of Medicine or across Tel Aviv University's campus, please visit AFTAU's website, and that's www.aftau.org. And a copy of today's webinar, today's conversation, will be found in our webinar library, which is on our website. And at that, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.